I knew something was different the moment she walked in. I'd done thousands of makeovers. Thousands. Brides nervous about their big day. Executives preparing for photo shoots. Influencers chasing the perfect look. I thought I'd seen it all. But when Lauren stepped through that salon door, something shifted. It wasn't just her presence, though she had plenty of that. It was the way she looked at me. Not at the glamorous space I'd built. Not at the reputation I'd carefully crafted over years of relentless effort. She looked at me. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Fear. The kind that makes you realize your life is about to change, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I wasn't ready for the way she'd look at me. Not then. Maybe not ever. But to understand why that moment shattered me in the most beautiful way possible, you need to know where I came from. You need to understand the boy who spent years learning how to hide, and the man who finally learned how to be seen. I was 7 years old the first time I felt the fabric of my mother's dress between my fingers. She was at work. My father was outside fixing something in the garage, the way he always did on Saturday afternoons. And I was alone in their bedroom, standing in front of her closet like it was a doorway to another world. The dress was emerald green, with delicate lace around the collar. I remember thinking it looked like something a princess would wear. I remember the weight of it as I pulled it off the hanger. I remember the way my heart hammered in my chest as I held it up to myself in the mirror. I remember feeling, for the first time in my short life, like I was looking at someone real. That feeling didn't last long. My father found me there, standing in front of that mirror, drowning in fabric that pooled around my feet. I'll never forget the look on his face. Not anger, exactly. Something different. Confusion. Disappointment. Like he was looking at a puzzle piece that didn't fit anywhere. He didn't yell. He just took the dress, hung it back up, and told me to go play outside. Like boys should. But I couldn't stop. The next time, it was my mother's lipstick. I waited until everyone was asleep, crept into the bathroom, and painted my lips the brightest red I could find. I stared at myself in that mirror for 20 minutes, barely breathing, terrified someone would wake up and find me. But I couldn't look away. This was me. This person staring back. This was who I was supposed to be. School was worse. By the time I was 10, other kids had started to notice. The way I walked, the way I talked, the way I gravitated toward the girls during recess instead of playing football with the boys. They noticed everything, and they made sure I knew it. Sissy. Femboy. They would call out. The names cut deeper than any physical wound could. Because they weren't entirely wrong. I was different. I just didn't have the words for it yet. The teachers saw it happening. Of course they did. But stopping bullying requires effort, requires confrontation, requires caring. And it was so much easier to pretend they didn't see. So much easier to let it happen in the blind spots, in the bathrooms, in the spaces between classes where no adult wanted to look too closely. My parents tried, in their own way. My mother bought me boy clothes in colors she thought I'd like. Bright blues, vibrant oranges. My father signed me up for sports, thinking maybe I just needed to find the right activity. Basketball, baseball, soccer, nothing stuck. We fought about it. A lot. Why can't you just be normal? My mother would ask, exhausted after another argument about why I refused to get a proper haircut. And I never had an answer, because I didn't know how to be normal. I only knew how to be me. The worst part wasn't the teasing, it wasn't the fights with my parents, it wasn't even the loneliness, though that was crushing in its own right. The worst part was learning to hide. I got good at it, really good. I learned to walk differently, talk differently, laugh at jokes that made my skin crawl. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less visible. I learned to perform masculinity like it was a role in a play, and I was terrified of forgetting my lines. By 13, I had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. But late at night, when everyone was asleep, I'd lock my bedroom door and become myself again, just for a little while. Just long enough to remember that person still existed underneath all the performance. I still remember the first time I stepped outside in public as myself, but that story is for another day. That's a chapter filled with its own kind of experience and triumph, and it deserves its own telling. For now, all you need to know is this. I survived. Barely, but I survived. High school should have been a fresh start. New building, new people, new possibilities. That's when I made myself a promise. I promised myself, if the world won't give me space, I'll create my own. I didn't know what that meant yet. Didn't know how I'd do it, but the promise was made, and I held on to it like a lifeline. When I turned 18 and graduated high school, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I told my father I wanted to study beauty and styling. I expected a fight, expected disappointment, maybe even anger. But my father, he surprised me. He sat me down at the kitchen table, And he said something I'll never forget. "I might not understand everything about you. I probably never will. But I see how hard you work. I see how much you care about this. And if this is who you're meant to be, then I'm going to make sure you become the best version of that person you can be." He wasn't perfect. We still had our moments, our misunderstandings, our awkward conversations where neither of us quite knew what to say. But he showed up for me. He enrolled me in one of the best beauty schools in the region. He helped me get the tools and supplies I needed. He made sure I had every opportunity to succeed. For the first time in my life, I felt supported. I threw myself into my studies with obsessive intensity. I learned everything I could about hair, makeup, styling, color theory, facial structure, skin types. I practiced on mannequin heads until my hands cramped. I experimented with techniques late into the night, perfecting my craft one brush stroke at a time. I wasn't just learning a trade, I was building an escape route. Beauty school led to apprenticeships. Apprenticeships led to positions at salons. And slowly, gradually, I started allowing myself to exist more openly. My clothes became more feminine. My makeup became a daily practice, not a secret shame. My mannerisms relaxed into something more natural, more genuine. Some clients loved it. Some whispered behind my back. Some never came back after their first appointment. I stopped caring, because for every person who rejected me, there were two more who saw my talent and didn't give a damn about anything else. There were people who specifically requested me because they'd heard I was the best, and my identity was just an interesting footnote, not a disqualification. By the time I was 27, I'd opened my own salon. It was everything I'd dreamed of as that scared teenager hiding eyeliner in his backpack. Elegant, professional, successful. A space where I could finally, fully, unapologetically be myself while doing work I loved. The salon became known, featured in local magazines, built a following on social media, attracted high-profile clients who'd drive from neighboring cities just to sit in my chair. I'd created my own space, just like I promised. But for all the success, for all the validation, for all the proof that I could thrive as my authentic self, there was one thing missing. Something I told myself I didn't need. Something I'd convinced myself wasn't meant for people like me. Someone to share it with. The appointment request came through on a Tuesday afternoon. Premium package. Full makeover. Scheduled for the following week. Nothing unusual about that. I regularly booked high-tier appointments weeks in advance. But then came the follow-up message. "I'd like to request Jamie specifically. If he's not available, I'll reschedule. I'm willing to pay the highest rate. This appointment is important to me, and I've heard he's the best." My receptionist showed me the message, eyebrows raised. We got requests like this occasionally, but something about the tone stood out. Polite, but firm. Complimentary, but not fawning. Someone who knew exactly what they wanted. I confirmed the appointment without thinking much about it. High-profile clients weren't new to me. I'd done makeovers for local celebrities, business executives, people preparing for major life events. This was just another day at the salon. Except it wasn't. The week passed normally. Clients came and went. Hair was styled, makeup was applied, confidence was restored. The usual rhythm of salon life. And then Friday arrived. I was finishing up with a client when my receptionist caught my eye. She tilted her head toward the entrance, and I glanced up. That's when I saw her. Lauren. Though I didn't know her name yet. She stood in the doorway like she'd stepped out of a different era. Not old-fashioned exactly, but possessing a kind of elegance that felt rare in modern life. She wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but the way she carried herself made it look expensive. Her hair fell naturally around her shoulders, and her makeup was minimal, understated. But it was her energy that stopped me mid-movement. Calm, centered, present. She looked around the salon with genuine appreciation, taking in the decor I'd spent months perfecting. Then her eyes found mine, and she smiled. "Jamie?" she asked, even though she clearly already knew the answer. "That's me," I managed, setting down my styling tools and crossing the salon to greet her. "You must be Lauren." "I am." She extended her hand, and when I shook it, her grip was warm and confident. "Thank you for making time for me. I know you're busy." "It's my pleasure," I said automatically, falling into professional mode. But underneath the practiced politeness, my heart was doing something weird, something I hadn't felt in years. I was nervous. Me, Jamie, the person who'd done makeovers for some of the most intimidating clients in the city, the person who could chat comfortably with anyone while transforming their appearance. I was nervous. She followed me to my station, and I began the usual consultation. What look was she hoping for? Any specific inspiration? What was the occasion? "No specific occasion," she said, settling into the chair. "I just wanted to feel beautiful, and I wanted to meet you. that stopped me. Meet me? She met my eyes in the mirror. I've heard a lot about you. About your work, yes, but also about you. The way you've built this place. The way you exist in the world without apology. I find that inspiring. I didn't know what to say to that. Clients complimented my work all the time, but this felt different. More personal. More intentional. That's kind of you to say, I murmured, preparing my tools to hide the way my hands had started shaking slightly. It's not kindness, she said gently. It's observation. As I began working on her hair, we fell into conversation. Not the usual small talk about weather or traffic or weekend plans. Real conversation. She asked about my journey, how I'd learned my craft, what inspired me, what challenges I'd faced. And somehow, impossibly, I found myself answering honestly. I talked about beauty school, about my father's unexpected support, about building the salon from nothing, about the fear and courage required to exist visibly as myself every single day. She listened, truly listened, not waiting for her turn to speak or checking her phone or glazing over with polite disinterest. She was present with every word, asking follow-up questions that showed she actually cared about the answers. I learned about her too. She worked in publishing, editing books about art and culture. She traveled extensively. She had strong opinions about music and architecture and the best coffee shops in the city. But more than the facts, I learned her energy. Thoughtful, curious, kind without being performative about it. As I worked on her makeup, blending foundation, and contouring her features with practiced precision, I became aware of how close we were. How her eyes followed my movements in the mirror, how the conversation had shifted from professional to something more intimate without either of us acknowledging it. I liked her. The realization hit me with uncomfortable clarity. I liked her. Not in a friendly, client-professional way. In a dangerous way. In a way that made me want to know everything about her. In a way that made me hope this appointment would last longer than it was supposed to. When I finally finished and turned her chair toward the mirror, I watched her face transform as she took in her reflection. She looked stunning. The makeover had enhanced everything beautiful about her while maintaining her natural elegance. Her eyes seemed brighter, her bone structure more defined, her entire presence elevated. But she wasn't looking at herself, she was looking at me. And that look, my heart wasn't ready for it. Lauren stood slowly, still holding my gaze in the mirror. You're incredibly talented, she said softly. But the way she said it didn't feel like a compliment about my technical skills. It felt like something more. Thank you, I managed, beginning to clean up my station to give my trembling hands something to do. She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume, something subtle and floral that matched her energy perfectly. Jamie, she said, and the way my name sounded in her voice made me freeze. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever get tired of hiding your glow? The question disarmed me completely. I looked up at her, and she was watching me with such gentle understanding that something in my chest cracked open. I don't hide anymore, I said quietly. Not like I used to. No, she agreed. You've built something beautiful here. You exist authentically in a way most people are too scared to attempt. But I still sense guardedness, like you've protected yourself for so long that you're not sure how to let your guard down. She was right, terrifyingly right. I'd built this salon, built this life, built this version of myself that could exist openly and successfully. But I'd also built walls. Protection against rejection, against judgment, against the kind of pain I'd experienced growing up. Maybe, I admitted. She smiled then, soft and hopeful. Can I take you out? Maybe tonight? Everything stopped. The question hung in the air between us, and I felt every fear I'd ever harbored come rushing back at once. What will people think if they see us together? What if she's just curious about what it's like to date someone like me? Woke out fair. What if this ruins my reputation, my business, everything I've built? Woba fair. What if she changes her mind when she realizes what being with me actually means? What if I let myself fall for her and she leaves like everyone predicted people would leave me? The old instinct to protect myself screamed at me to politely decline, to thank her for the interest but maintain professional boundaries, to keep myself safe behind the walls I'd spent years constructing. But she waited, didn't rush me, didn't try to convince me or fill the silence with reassurances. She just stood there with that soft smile and hopeful eyes, giving me space to make my own choice. And I thought about that scared teenager hiding eyeliner in his backpack, the one who'd promised himself he'd create his own space, his own life, his own happiness. That teenager hadn't survived everything he'd survived, just so the adult version of him could live in fear. Yes, I heard myself say, I'd like that. Her smile widened, genuine and bright. 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. I confirmed. She paid for her appointment, thanked me again, and left with a final glance over her shoulder that made my stomach flip. The moment she was gone, I had to sit down. My receptionist appeared beside me, grinning like she'd witnessed something momentous. "Did that just happen?" "I think so," I said, still processing. "That was the most romantic thing I've ever seen in this salon," she declared, "and I've seen 3 proposals." I laughed, but underneath the laughter was genuine terror. Because saying yes had been the easy part. Now I had to show up. That evening, getting ready for our date, I changed clothes 4 times. Each outfit felt wrong in a different way. Too formal, too casual, too much, not enough. I settled on something that felt like me. Fitted pants, a flowing top, heels that made me feel confident, makeup that enhanced without overwhelming, hair styled with the same care I'd give any client. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I recognized, someone I'd fought to become, someone I was proud to be. But I also saw someone who was about to be deeply, terrifyingly vulnerable. She picked me up at 7 exactly. We went to a small Italian restaurant she knew, tucked away on a quiet street I'd somehow never noticed, despite living in this city for years. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and food that smelled like someone's grandmother had been cooking all day. We talked for hours. About everything and nothing. About childhood dreams and adult realities. About books and art and music. About fear and courage and the distance between them. And then, somewhere between the pasta and dessert, she said something that changed everything. "I need to tell you something," Lauren said, setting down her wine glass and leaning forward slightly. "I didn't find your salon by accident. I'd been following your work for months. Saw your posts online, read the features about you, heard stories from people you'd worked with, and I was captivated." "By my work?" I asked. "By you," she corrected. "By the way you walk in heels like you were born wearing them. By the boldness it takes to exist exactly as you are in a world that constantly tells people like you to be smaller. By how you own your femininity as strength rather than apologizing for it. In a world full of people wearing masks, you're aggressively, beautifully real." My throat tightened. And that's when it happened. The moment I'd spent years fearing. The moment of being fully seen by someone, not despite who I was, but because of who I was. Not in spite of my femininity, but celebrated for it. Not as a curiosity or an experiment, but as a person worthy of genuine affection and respect. The fear I'd carried my entire life, that I was too different, too much, too feminine to be loved openly, crumbled. Because here was Lauren, looking at me across the table in a small Italian restaurant, and she wasn't confused, wasn't ashamed, wasn't hesitant. She was sure, and her certainty made me braver than I'd ever been. That was 8 months ago. 8 months since Lauren walked into my salon and saw me in a way I'd never been seen before. 8 months since I said yes to a date that terrified me. 8 months since the thing I feared most turned out to be the thing I needed most. We're together now. Really together. Not hiding, not keeping it quiet, not treating our relationship like a secret that needs to be protected from the world. She comes to the salon sometimes just to say hello. She kisses me goodbye in front of clients. She posts photos of us together on her social media. She introduces me to her friends, her family, her colleagues as her partner, with zero hesitation or embarrassment. And every single time, part of me still can't quite believe it, because I spent so many years being told directly and indirectly that this wasn't possible for people like me, that I was too different, that nobody would love me openly, that the best I could hope for was someone who'd accept me in private but distance themselves in public. People predicted I'd fail. They said I'd never build a successful business while being so openly myself. They said I was making my life harder than it needed to be by refusing to tone down my femininity, my aesthetic, my entire existence. They said someone like me could never be loved openly, that I'd have to choose between authenticity and happiness, between being myself and being loved. They were wrong. Not because life suddenly became easy, not because discrimination disappeared or everyone suddenly accepted me. There are still awkward moments. Still judgmental looks, still people who make assumptions about me, based on how I look and how I move through the world. But I built myself piece by piece, from that scared 7-year-old trying on his mother's dress, to the teenager hiding eyeliner in his backpack, to the beauty school student learning his craft, to the salon owner creating his own space, to the person standing here now, in love and loved in return. And love found me anyway. She chose me because I was real. And that's what I want you to understand if you're listening to this and you're scared. If you're hiding parts of yourself because you're terrified of rejection. If you've been told that being authentically you means accepting loneliness as the price of admission. If you live as your truth long enough, the right people will recognize you. Not everyone, maybe not even most people, but the right people, the people who matter, the people who see your courage and your authenticity and your refusal to diminish yourself, and they're drawn to that light rather than threatened by it. You're going to be okay. More than okay. You're going to thrive. The salon is busier than ever now. We've expanded, hired more stylists, built a reputation that extends beyond the city that's worth every moment of fear it took to get here. Thank you for listening to my story, for staying with me through the hard parts and the beautiful parts and the terrifying parts that turned out to be beautiful after all. If this touched you in any way, if you've ever felt like you had to hide who you are just to be accepted, just to survive, I see you. Your story matters. Your authenticity matters. The world needs more people brave enough to exist without apology. Come back for more stories like this, because I have more to tell. More moments of fear and courage and transformation that I'm finally ready to share. And if you want to hear about the first time I ever stepped out in public as myself, the whole uncensored story of that terrifying, liberating, life-changing moment, let me know in the comments, because that's a chapter I'm finally ready to share. Until then, be brave, be yourself, be unapologetically, courageously real. The right people will recognize you, I promise. The end.
The Gender Diary exists to light that path with shared stories. Whether you found connection in this narrative, you're on your own journey of gender exploration, or you're here seeking understanding, your subscription fuels our mission. Every subscriber empowers us to keep illuminating these authentic experiences for our community. Kindly drop a comment below. Your voice adds to the tapestry of experiences that makes this space meaningful. Until our next story unfolds.